25 minutes or so will be open networking. We are being recorded and we are live also on Facebook so that everyone knows, which is exciting for us. We've got a partnership with Dutch Design Week and Ingrid is representing on that end. We'll be getting into formal introductions after 10 o'clock. But really this part of the discussion is an opportunity for us to meet, mingle, discuss, talk about sustainability, talk about urban development in a very casual way. So for the participants that are on the call, we can certainly take questions and we invite you to participate. For example, we'd love to know where your home base is. Is your home base the States? Is your home base the Netherlands? We would love for those of you that are on the call to either raise your hand and then we can bring you in a call with us on the discussion with us. And you can let us know where you are based. We think that's important given the topics we are moving into. The other question that we also have is anybody on the call involved in the sustainability space? And if you are, what is it that you're focused in on? We'd love to hear your backgrounds and interests that you might have within sustainability. So for example, Ingrid was just mentioning on fashion. So one of the verticals or one of the sectors of Dutch Design Week is fashion. One of the things that we're going to be talking about today is also the supply chain. So the supply chain is something that's very critical in thinking about material use, aggregates of how do you get something from point A to point B, which would be a closet. And how does the whole shipping, for example, economy work? A lot of us are now talking about the backups with COVID and the impacts that had on the shipping industry. So what kinds of impacts does that have with environment? These are all conversations and topics that we'd like to get into. So we invite anybody on the call with us now. As I mentioned, certainly raise your hands and let us know some thoughts that you might have. But Ingrid, until we have more friends in the conversation, are these topics that you're also exploring during Dutch Design Week as you're hosting panels?
Mm-hmm. Indeed, we're exploring many different topics, also bio. I'm going to mention some of the, I've got here the map of Dutch Design Week, so I'm going to show you like, I really want to give you a bit of a flavor, so you're so far away. So this is Eindhoven. It's a very small city. I once had a presentation in Detroit, and then I showed a little DAF car we have from Eindhoven. And that would be exactly on the screen, but then I had a Detroit car and that would kind of really come over. Well, it's a kind of the same proportion, you might say, for the cities at least. I think it's even more. But to say, we do have really like topics like sustainable products in general, but also very much on mobility, on new energy. We call Eco Pioneers is one of our tracks, so people can just follow one of the tracks that are on the top or on the bottom of our map. People that come and don't know where do I need to go to, because it's really a lot. There are around 1,500 people at this moment participating. And sometimes these are more than one participants when they enter the, and it's also about future cities, for instance. So we will have talks about food farm, yes, about getting really social events together. We have a social design lobby. There's, well, everything, every aspect of design is featured in Dutch Design Week, for sure.
Well, we saw your calendar and there's no lack of incredible things going on. And how is everybody fitting all the great ideas and projects that you have and opportunities in their calendar? Last year you were virtual and this year you're doubling up on real world experiences. What a good change. Yeah, what a good change.
Well, the good thing is that even a lot of international people know to find their way and are allowed to find their way, you might say, after well, the various lockdowns in different countries. it's really true that that there's nothing above life experiences. I had a workshop this morning, indeed also kind of really hubs where you can really work on future urban, the urban development, let's say it in general like that. So, there were a lot of people around there, and normally you will not see those people so easily in an online environment. But I think still that online is really a good alternative because you can have so many people from everywhere joining, and it makes it also really, I think it's important that what we do reaches many people because inclusive society is also one of our topics these days. So it's about yeah, and not just about design for all, meaning that people should be able to access everywhere. It's about gender, well, like also we need to really look into a different way to today's society and how we should all get along with each other, you might say. I think that's an important thing to be aware of. And our Embassy of Inclusive Society has a hairdress salon. So there are different hairdressers from different parts in Eindhoven and for all kind of gender and all kind of types of hair. So it's a really nice way also to bring a lot of people together and to lower the threshold and to show that design's definitely not as an elitist thing. Let's say it like that.
Well, good design is form and function, and that needs to align with a good life, right? Healthy, good life. So I see Eva is also on with us, one of our panelists that's coming and being introduced later on today. Welcome, Eva.
Hi, nice to be here.
Thank you for joining. And you're calling in from?
From Amsterdam.
Yeah, cool. Love Amsterdam. What a cool, cool city.
I love it too. I'm originally from the States though, so I have the dual perspective here.
Good for you. Love that. Wonderful. Well, thanks for joining us. So what we're doing from this earlier time frame for the next maybe 20 minutes, 15 minutes, is an open dialogue with attendees that are on our call. And we have quite a few that are already on. So thank you everybody for joining. As I mentioned earlier, this is being recorded and it's also on Facebook Live. And we have some opportunities of people that have been here and joining us from Detroit, of course, and Al Cunningham, so welcome. Cindy, welcome. On behalf of Terry Barkley, thanks for joining. That's exciting.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, great. And you're in Detroit, presumably? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
It's raining today. Today's a rainy day.
It is indeed.
Pouring rain, actually. There's a lot of construction going on within the city, so I think that they're kind of holding back on it for today because of the rain. But it needed it too. And then we've got our teams also and friends of ours from Chicago. So that's wonderful. And questions that we also had for the attendees, we'd love to know, are you on the call? Are you involved within the sustainability space? Are you focused in on the circular economy? Do you do work within those spaces and those verticals? And if you do, please do let us know what you're working on and what you do. And you can send that in as a chat message. You can also raise your hand at the bottom of the screen. We can loop you in on the call. And we're based in Detroit as well. And the team is here working hard on this. We had a pretty incredible panel on Tuesday, 2 days ago, talking about the topics, which we will talk about in a few minutes. We had 5 key leaders on the space that were part of this. And maybe what we could do is also show our video so that all of you can see the great work that we did up to this point. So I think we're ready to do that. Okay, let's turn it over to our video.
I see that we need to change our environments regularly because of updates, because of extra demands that are coming up, and because of
We lost audio. I don't think it's playing through the Zoom audio.
Believe that we have to innovate to get to zero. Like Bill Gates was saying in the book he put out recently,
I see that we need to change our environments regularly because of updates, because of extra demands that are coming up, and because of simple facts that you want to do something different than I want to do. So to allow for that, that makes also urban designs longer enduring and therefore more sustainable.
Do we keep on producing and consuming and overproducing and maybe also over-consuming, or do we find a new balance? Do we find a better number? Do we find a greater number?
We truly believe that cities are the future labs of the world and citizens are the scientists who can come up with those solutions.
we believe that we have to innovate to get to zero. Like Bill Gates was saying in the book he put out recently, we can't get to zero without innovation. We need technology, we need new leadership, new thinking.
Sustainability is clear and critical to quality of life. When we're talking about quality of life, it can't be a one-time thing. It can't be something that happens for a short period of time. It has to be something that is ongoing and that really allows people to fully engage and fully be themselves and fully be present and know that they're invested in their communities.
Detroit has been really lucky to be an epicenter of a lot of different social and environmental movements. And the work around environmental justice, social justice, racial justice is really at the core of what's happening in the community here in Detroit.
I'm a strong believer in the circular economy. I had the opportunity to introduce the circular economy to the Netherlands 10 years ago, and it has become quite a prominent topic in the business arena, but also in terms of politics. Design a city based on a circular economy where we want to preserve value, where we want to apply new kinds of healthy materials.
When we think about urban strategies and how to be more sustainable, we really think about how infrastructure, the things that we usually take for granted within a city environment, can help play a larger role in how people move through their environments.
We have committed to 100% of the electricity from Michigan Central to be sourced renewably.
We as a design community have to start looking in the mirror. What can we do? What can we really do? Even though it's so extremely difficult when you're just a part in a whole chain, but you're a crucial and fundamental part, and we need to start making steps.
Hi, we're back. Okay. Should I be off mute?
I don't know if you can hear that, but there's a really serious
Yes,
echo.
is this any better?
No.
What's going on? Is this any better?
So maybe somebody needs to switch off maybe in the room, in the control room. Mm-hmm.
How's that? Yeah. Sorry, guys.
No worries. I mean, this is what happens
Technology.
in this virtual world.
Give us 1 second.
I guess in the meantime, Ivana, while you're sorting that, should we respond to some
Ingrid,
of
yeah, maybe you can jump in, Ingrid.
Yes, I will do that. You want me to do a kind of really introduction already to Dutch Design Week? Or what do you want
Let's
me?
wait a little bit longer. I don't know
Oh,
why
it's still,
the
it's still too early, isn't it?
yeah.
Okay. Well, I
Apologies
don't
on the
mind
technology
to
here. We got
jump
a couple
because
computers going at the same time. Okay, I think you can hear me now. A little bit better.
that's really much better.
Correct? Does it
Yes.
sound better, everybody? I'm assuming it is.
It's good.
So we've got a couple of folks that came in that are great, that are giving us some good comments on working within the sustainability space. We have Dora Marie that is in Ann Arbor and is working within sustainability. Dora, if you'd like to say something, I think that'd be really interesting to bring you in on the call. We'd certainly welcome you into the conversation, and we can loop you in to get Dora in on the call and into the panel for a moment. And then is Dora there? Okay. And then we've got Alyssa that's also, Masters of Architecture. Great. At Florida International University. Wonderful. Second sustainability studio. Go, Alyssa. Wonderful. Happy to hear. Make sure you're an advocate for all of our sustainability issues around the world. John Freeman, that's working in renewable energy for homeowners. That's excellent. And fossil fuels, reliance on fossil fuels, of course, something to be eliminated. Big things to talk about, especially with climate change and the UN Climate Summit. So great news. And Bush, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, from Royal Oak, and she's working in sustainability and the restoration of ecology. I am a huge proponent, big advocate of that in green spaces. If any of you would like to come in and join into the conversation, we certainly welcome that. Al Cunningham, waste recycling and repurposing. What in the world are we going to do with all this plastic that's out there? What are we going to do with all that plastic? Oh. Yeah, I know. It's like from the 40s till today. It's like the biggest problem. It's so convenient, but can't people think to not use plastic bags when they go buy 1 tube of toothpaste in the grocery store? I mean,
it's true.
Just
fantastic. I yesterday saw beautiful work in Dutch in Virtuals from a French graduate of the Design Academy, and she really made it to something to keep forever, that plastic, because it are kind of mirrors and then with beautiful colors, and she made it kind of let's say flowery framework, and then the mirrors in it. It's beautiful. You check it out. Maybe you can find it online. It's at Dutch in Virtual. So that's the plastic we want.
Fabulous. Good. There was somebody that I think the New York Times picked up on it, and I can't remember the name of the designer, who did an incredible collection of clothing with masks, with the medical masks that everyone is now, of course, wearing due to COVID. Very, very interesting. Pretty incredible, beautiful design. So we've got a couple more folks that joined us. One that says, hi, Fedor, Jeff Johnson. So he must know you, Fedor. Good to see you, Jeff.
Yes, we know him.
Oh, great. And Fedor joined too. Wonderful. Thanks for coming a little early. Wonderful.
Yes, of course.
I think I know Marcia Philippot, isn't it? Didn't we meet in Detroit in 16, I think it was, Marcia? Am I right?
Marcia, if she wants to join, she's welcome to, but she's a writer, and yeah, she's somebody that we were connected to also, and we did a great work together for an opera that was taking place in Detroit that she was a key component of bringing to life. So welcome, Marcia. Good to hear your voice here.
Well, hello. Yes, I'm a writer and a Detroitist. And You.
Ivana, it is wonderful to see you. And after our prior collaboration, and Ingrid, it's delightful to see you again. How sweet of you to remember me. Yes, it's wonderful to see you. Wonderful to see you and everyone.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining.
Happy you joined.
Yeah. We have Janet Atarian, and she's with Urban Design Principal at the Smith Group. Great. So Smith Group is a phenomenal organization and company here within, I don't know if you're national, but I definitely know you do work nationally, but you're in Detroit. And if Janet's on, hey, Janet.
Hi.
Hi.
Yes, we are national, but I am here in Detroit and out of the Detroit office, which has been in Detroit for over 150 years.
I know you guys are long-standing advocates for all design within Detroit and strategy around it. And you're working on clean stormwater. So that's some of the topic that we're going to be talking about today. So welcome. We're going to have, for everybody that's on the Zoom call here, we're going to have Q&A after our panel. So please, if you can stay afterwards, please consider that, and certainly have questions ready for the panelists as we move into that session. So just for context, we are recording and we are on Facebook Live. We had a great panel Tuesday, with 5 speakers that were engaging and extremely knowledgeable, both from the Dutch side and the Detroit side. We're going to make an introduction to all of us moving forward at 10 o'clock or 4 o'clock Central Time. But we've got a couple more minutes, so let me see who else is on the call. Al Cunningham, I'm also a communitarian. Interesting. What's a communitarian? That's a new cool word that I haven't used. Sorry. Do you want to bring like me into the process? Yes, Al. Tell us, if you're available, tell us what's a communitarian.
I hope you can only hear me and perhaps not see me, since I am still quite relaxed.
We can only hear you. We can only hear you.
I was hoping that was the case. I didn't see any indications to the contrary. But perhaps a communitarian is a word that I may have coined. I'm a writer by trade, so I guess that makes me a logophile. And if I don't know a word, then and I can put one together, then I'll do that. In this case, as a communitarian, I'm someone who is very much connected to the community in which I am living and working. And so I'm always looking for ways to increase the level of connection between people within the community, especially in a situation like we have here in Detroit at the moment, where we have a lot of change going on that can go either in a positive or somewhat different direction. So the great thing about Detroit is that we have so much space and we have so many resources. As far as, I'm thinking about the whole Packard situation and what's going to happen now with it and so forth. We have a bazillion Packard plants around Detroit. So we have lots of spaces to do the things that we need to do. We just need to get the people and the resources together.
Well, that's part of this whole conversation that we're having on Tuesday that we had, and then today, and couldn't be more relevant. And as we put climate into that mix and climate change, I mean, timing is, I believe, perfect for us to really think through what solutions could be for these challenges. What's the communitarian's name? Al Cunningham, correct? Is the communitarian's name. We might lease that from you, if you don't mind, Al. Your term communitarian, I think that's really clever. Really
I'll contribute it to the pro bono.
To the mission. Good. Wonderful.
We need more people that like to volunteer and that are so passionate about what's needed in the world today, that we all want to kind of really do whatever because we like the connection with the people like now online. I think it's really marvelous to have this online international get together. Thank you so much, Elle.
Yeah, absolutely agree. So we're going to give it just a couple more minutes and then we'll make an official introduction to the panel. I see Simon joined. Welcome. Welcome.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Of course. We're thrilled that you're able to join us. And you're calling us from New York, correct?
I actually just got to Boston about 30 minutes ago, so. Today I'm in Boston.
You're on the move. You're on the move. All right. Good. Hopefully I can see you during your conference that you have.
Yeah, I would love that.
Yeah. So that sounds very appropriate. All also on the topics we're talking about, sustainability and similar, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We're hosting an urban tech summit with Cornell Tech with a couple really interesting folks. One is Anthony Townsend, who literally wrote the book on smart cities and just did a great book on autonomous vehicles. And he has a new 10-year horizon scan on urban tech. And the other is Rit Agrawala, who was the CEO of Sidewalk Labs and wrote the climate plan for the city of New York years ago. And he has a new kind of rebooting New York report. So we're doing an urban tech summit in November, which we're having a panel on Detroit specifically, because we chose a few cities around the world and Detroit had to be one of them.
Highlight Detroit.
Absolutely.
So I had a chance, actually, speaking of Sidewalk Labs, I had a chance to go to Toronto. We're talking about Google's Sidewalk Labs in Toronto, to experience it live with their team quite a few years ago. And that was pretty interesting. If folks don't know about it, certainly something to check out. It's not in existence because of political situations, I believe, but very fascinating opportunity.
Well, do you know what their office is now?
No.
Budget Rent-A-Car.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes no sense at all. Okay.
No, I just saw like it was on Twitter. Like this is what it was a couple years ago, and now it's a Budget Rent-A-Car.
Okay. Well, I think we're just about there. So it's 10 o'clock Detroit time, and it is 4 o'clock Eindhoven Dutch time. So welcome everybody to our summit, the second day, and this is the Sustainable Urban Design Summit. And it's a 2-day event in which we will dig into how sustainable urban planning and the circular economy can energize life in Detroit, Southeast Michigan, as well as Eindhoven and other Dutch cities. We're also going to be looking at how do we bring in Dutch expertise to Michigan. So on both days, we've had an incredible and remarkable international lineup of speakers from the worlds of economic development, of entrepreneurship, architecture, urban design, sustainability. And as I mentioned, this is the second of the 2 panels. Today's event, Tuesday's event actually was moderated by our good friend and Dutch journalist, Tracy Metz, who's originally from California, and she's now based in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. We had speakers that attended Tuesday's summit, Victoria Prouse of Michigan Central from Ford Motor Company, Guido Bram of Powered by Design, Olga Stella from Detroit Design Corps, Ryan Friedrichs of Related Companies, and Petar Weissman of Arcadis, and he was based in San Francisco. So that was Tuesday's summit for those of you that were able to attend. We were talking about sustainable urban design and also the circular economy, as we are going to be speaking about that today. Today, I am your moderator. My name is Ivana Kalifatic, and I'm the founder of Detroitisit, which is a hyperlocal media platform, and we're a partner of this summit. The Sustainable Summit was brought to you by us and also by our partners, the Consulate General of the Kingdom of the Netherlands in Chicago, Dutch Design Week, which Ingrid is representing today, and Jorn represented on Tuesday, which is taking place this week. There's a lot of events, as you heard, that are happening, and you should certainly go to ddw.nl for more information on those events. And also many thanks to our sponsor, the Sustainable Business Network of Detroit, that happened to support this in a great cause and make this possible. So once more, we are on Facebook Live and we're being recorded. After the summit ends at 11 or 5 Central, we are going to ask you to fill out a survey if you've got the time and if you've got any input for us to make this better. The hope is that we're going to have this live next year in Detroit with the same partners and others. And that's a bit of an introduction to the summit. I would also now like to introduce, as I mentioned, from our partner, Dutch Design Week, Ingrid. Yes, and Ingrid is the International and Public Affairs Manager for Dutch Design Foundation. And I'll turn it over to you, Ingrid, to make a bit of an introduction to our partnership and, of course, what you're doing at Dutch Design Week.
Thank you so much, Ivana. I'm really happy to have you here, although it's only online. I would have loved to have you kind of really walking behind me in this new Order of Fashion exhibition, for instance, or in our Sustainable Architecture Pavilion, or wherever. There are 1,500 designers all over Eindhoven, and I think we've got 300 plus events. So that's really wonderful after the lockdown, after being closed, you could say locked up also sort of the last year. It's a live edition. We didn't have a live edition last year. And I think it's really beautiful to see what this brings. You see Ketelhuis Square on this picture, and that's the heart of Dutch Design Week, so I'm next to it. Meanwhile, a big apartment block has been built there with a lot of trees on it to make it a more green environment on this former Philips industrial area. Forbidden zone it was, and now it's really full of life, full of people, professionals, journalists, media, students, grandparents with their grandchildren, and everybody is looking to this optimistic view that designers are showing this year again. Despite a year of being locked up, maybe in a little apartment with kids or whatever, they've had really the power and the resilience also to bring beautiful solutions to a lot of the challenges we face today. So I think it's really wonderful to see it so optimistic. We always speak about optimism, but it was reason enough to be maybe a bit less optimistic this year. But I feel that we are still believing that we can make the change. We are drivers of change, and we need more and more people to get connected to that. So my work is on bringing the connections to the Dutch Design Foundation. So we do more projects than just Dutch Design Week, which is of course our biggest project. And I think it's important to look a little bit to what we're doing, and I hope also to have the chance to talk to more about it in the course maybe of this year. I was just suggesting to Ivana, so let's have more online sessions and maybe on one specific topic, not like a lot of speakers, but maybe especially one speaker, and then have interaction about it, because I love to go to Detroit again. I love the city, I love the people. I think it's bringing a lot of opportunities, this collaboration of looking into how we can have an exchange between our designers to work on the different challenges. In Eindhoven, it has really a different scope, as I was just explaining. This is the map of Eindhoven for people who didn't see it yet. So the Dutch Design Week map, I think that Detroit could never be on this map. It should be at least, I think, 10 times bigger. So just to show you a little bit the scale we are dealing with, but on the other hand, I think that doesn't matter. I think it's about the interactions and the connections between people and between communities and their built environment that needs to be really good and really make them healthy and happy. And I think that's an important thing to talk about during this session you're going to have this coming hour. So I want to wish you a lot of success, and I have lots of more things to say, but I zip my mouth and I give the word back to Ivana. And I wish you a lot of, really nice conversation, but also that I hope that I can get you over to Dutch Design Week also maybe the coming year. So thanks so much for joining us, and I look forward to collaborating with you. Bye-bye, Ivana.
Thank you, Ingrid. So glad that you told us as much as you did, and we'll certainly have to make a collective trip to Dutch Design Week. Thank you. So moving into our panelists, I'd like to start making an introduction to them. Our first panelist is Simon Sylvester Chidari, co-founder of Detroit Urban Solutions and the founder and executive director of CivLab, which is a nonprofit based in Detroit and New York and London. A little bit about him: partnership with TechTown Detroit and Wayne State. In 2020, he co-founded Detroit Urban Solutions, a Detroit urban tech collaborative of about 30 organizations working with innovating in cities. He also teaches at the Global Entrepreneurship at NYU Center for Global Affairs, and he's on the future of cities at Imperial College Business School of London, also teaching. Previously, Simon helped build out the Urban Future Lab at NYU Global Cities Group, where he worked as an advisor on cities to the International Trade Administration, U.S. Commerce, under Secretary Pritzker. Welcome, Simon. The second of our panelists is Kate Gasparo, who's the director of the Office of Urban Strategy and Innovation at Bedrock. Her career was built around connecting people with their built environments, something that we completely believe in. In her role, Kate focused on Bedrock's emerging sustainability strategy and district infrastructure development in Detroit and Cleveland. She studied at Clemson University, and she has an environmental engineering degree from Stanford University as well. Before she joined the team at Bedrock, she was a project manager for 5 Point Communities, which is a firm that specializes in the development of mixed-use projects in California. Welcome to Detroit, Kate. Thrilled to have you. Third up as our panelist is the esteemed Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist, the second of the state of Michigan. Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist has dedicated his career to fixing problems for hardworking families. The Lieutenant Governor served as social media manager and for 2008, the Obama campaign in Washington, D.C. He spent 3 years as national campaign director at MoveOn.org, where he spearheaded equity and justice campaigns. And he served as the first ever director of innovation and emerging tech for the city of Detroit, where he used public data and technology to address everyday concerns the community was facing. He's an extremely big advocate of the city of Detroit in particular, and he also lives there with his family. So welcome and thank you for joining the panel, Lieutenant Governor. The following panelist we have is Eva Gledek, who is the founder and CEO of Metabolic, which is a consulting, research, and venture building firm based on tackling global sustainability challenges and advancing a circular economy. She's drawn on her training in molecular biology and industrial ecology to advise hundreds of companies and governments and nonprofits. And she's consistently listed among the top influencers in sustainability in the Netherlands. And of course, the Netherlands is recognized as a leading country in the transition to the circular economy. Welcome, Eva, and we can't wait to have a conversation and discussion with you on these topics. And then our fifth panelist is Fedor Braun, who is the Associate Director for Mvrdv Architects. He oversees the work for the America Studio for Mvrdv. And one of the key projects he's currently leading is the glass mural building in Eastern Market, which is being developed by Firm Real Estate. Fedor joined Mvrdv in 2016. He was with other esteemed firms in the Netherlands. One of them is UN Studio. And he's been instrumental to the success of numerous international competitions. And he has an extensive technical background as a building engineer. So welcome, everybody, to the panel. So thrilled that you're here. Hi, everyone. So if you can unmute yourselves to the panelists, please. I think we're all unmuted, Simon, and yeah, great. Okay. So this is an open conversation between the five of you and myself. I'm going to preface with questions, and it's truly meant to be a discussion opportunity on all the big topics that we're all facing. So let's jump in. So as we're looking at, speaking of torrential rains, today, it's been raining like crazy in Detroit. So the torrential rains, the mudslides, the obvious climate change, it's resulted in huge expenses for cities and displaced citizens the world over. The UN sustainability goals, they set a standard, and Detroit has a sustainable action agenda for sustainability. What actions do you plan to propose in the near future that can help produce some change on these topics? And I'd like to turn this over to either the Lieutenant Governor or Simon to take a stab at some of these questions that we have.
Thank you, Ivana. I'm happy to start and then have folks jump in. First of all, it is great to see everybody. It is ironic that we are having this conversation about Detroit, the city where I live and the city where I love, but I'm actually speaking with you from Marquette, Michigan, almost all the way up at the top of the state this morning. But nevertheless, these issues that you're describing in this question relate to the impacts of climate change, impact cities of all shapes and sizes across the state, the country, and the world. So this is really important. You know, Governor Gretchen Whitmer and I, when we took office, when we ran for this office, we talked a lot about climate change and how important it was to make sure that the state of Michigan's response to climate change was actually able to meet this moment as we're seeing, you know, historic flooding events. And this summer in Detroit, we got 2 months of rain in about 6 hours at the end of June, when we saw flooding in Detroit and surrounding communities. But we had a flooding event similar to that in 2019 and one similar to that in 2014. And so we need to make sure that our infrastructure actually can be designed to withstand this, and that our practices and the things that we do as people and the systems that we build are actually more sustainable. And so, you know, certainly at the state level, we're investing in the infrastructure to be able to better handle these kinds of events. They're not even disasters anymore because they're becoming more common, these types of events, but also putting the state more broadly on the path to carbon neutrality by 2030 for the state government, 2050 for the entire state, and supporting local governments like the city of Detroit and others who are making these investments at the local level in their infrastructure systems. We also have some big bets we need to make when it comes to other practices, such as how we our role in the mobility economy, the electrification of the economy, and making sure that not only the energy is coming from clean energy sources, but that also we're burning less carbon in all of our mobility options. And so we've been a leader in investing in electrification infrastructure, charging infrastructure. We have a program coming out of Corktown connecting the Ann Arbor with the CAVNU connected vehicle corridor, an autonomous vehicle corridor that's going to really lead to some international innovations in how we can move that forward. We also have been innovating in terms of actually defining a mile of wireless inductive charging roads that are going to be invented and innovated here in Michigan, and that kind of technology we think will translate well. So these kinds of investments that we're making at the state level, we think will have an impact, and they have to, because this is dire, this is important, and we have to take climate change seriously, and we do in our administration.
Fantastic. And I know that that's something you personally are a huge advocate of, because you are a user of the city that you live in the sense of being a citizen of the city. And you also bike, as I know.
Right.
And this all matters because you know, the climate change, it's such a big part of our lives. And for anybody that's avoiding the topic, it's just unbelievable, I think, to most of us that are on this call. But Simon, what are your thoughts on this as you start working with your organizations on the topic?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you, Ivana, for having me.
Of course.
And thank you for making me follow up, following the Lieutenant Governor, putting the pressure on. But no, I think, you know, climate change is a really good place to start. It's where I started and where I kind of began my career, and really took the perspective of, I'm not an engineer, so I'm not one of the people really building a lot of those tools. However, there are lots of resources and great organizations that can be activated towards solving these problems. I think a lot of us have heard that stat that by 2050, 80% of the world is going to live in cities. And with these obvious concerns that are coming due to climate, you know, what's going to unfold? And Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist spoke a lot about infrastructure. And I think, you know, part of that is our social infrastructure, right? And Ivana, you mentioned the importance of hyperlocality. And so at Detroit Urban Solutions in Techtown, we're really trying to think of solving cities at a hyperlocal level, looking all the way from the neighborhood to the city level, to the state level. And then even how do we partner with organizations like the Dutch Consulate. I've actually got to have a lot of experience helping bring Dutch companies over to the US in New York, and those types of collaborations are going to be incredibly important to solving the mass amount of problems that are going to emerge. And while, you know, there are going to be lots of problems that climate change creates, it's also about thinking not just on the solutions themselves, but what's the economic opportunity that those solutions can bring to, and what's the economic opportunity of building things like CAVNU and electrified highways here locally. And so, you know, if we can create a model that's leveraging resources, working together, and not just solving problems, but bringing more jobs to Michigan and Detroit, then I think we'll be in a much better place. And personally, you know, I love working in Detroit because of the enthusiasm, because of the incredible institutions and smart people that we're going to speak to today. And so, you know, is climate change scary? Yes, but do we have the people and the resources to solve a lot of these problems? I think so too.
You had a couple of good quotes actually that as we were working with you through the video and through some of the materials, that you really do believe that cities are the future labs of the world, and scientists, citizens are the scientists who can come up with solutions. So that's pretty awesome, Simon. I think all of us can agree with that. And I think it's also as who would say, Oprah would say, a tweetable moment. But it's key. I mean, that's, you know, I'm a believer in this, that human beings make up the spaces that we're in, and they're not gonna, we cause the problems, they're not gonna solve themselves unless we solve them for them. So I completely agree with that. Moving on to the extension to this topic. So for example, the materials or the techniques, whether they're bio-based, whether it's daylighting, whether it's the natural environment and looking at wastewater mitigation, adaptability, modularity as you look at built experiences and spaces. How can we help to expand the longevity or the usability of the built environment and look at buildings in a completely new and different way? Fedor, I think maybe with Mvrdv and the projects that you have and that you're working either in the Netherlands, but obviously here in Michigan and in the States, you might have some great input on that.
Yeah, thank you for having me also. Really nice to be virtually back in Detroit. I was there 2 years ago. Actually, I was planning the visit just before everything closed down, so hoping to be back there at a certain point. Yeah, we're working on several projects. Actually, 5 years ago, when I started to work on a project in Amsterdam, we started also to look at bio-based materials. Actually, the material that we were looking for back then was in the facade was an aubergine, that's called an eggplant in English, material that we wanted to use. That was really in the beginning of making that, and in the end we found some other product, but it was really nice to actually go to the process of making a natural product into a facade. I think what's important, we try also already for a long time to use buildings, like for instance what I'm telling is the building in Westerpark West in Amsterdam, is that there was an old building from a bank, but we want to reuse actually the structure also of that building. So it's really nice to then, if you want to have some extra floors to build with wood because it's light, and it's also more sustainable to build some extra floors on that. And this is also how we really want to work to use what's already there and to also use what's actually in the neighborhood, not to get transported a lot of materials from far away. We also do, and actually there was a picture on my introduction, there's a picture of the Matrix building that's in Amsterdam, that's a laboratorium. And there we joined the Madaster, and that's a system that you already from the beginning say what kind of materials you're going to use. You're also going to construct them in a way that if in 20 years you want to demolish this building, you can get everything out of there. It's all clear what is there. So the concrete, the steel, and that it's all for reuse. So that's one of the things we really think is interesting, to reuse all this stuff. And that means also in a different way building, because you cannot pour the concrete together. You actually have to think smart about that also. And for instance, also for a project in Eindhoven we're working on, that's New Bergen, we make special sun cuts that also the existing buildings still have enough daylight, also enough sun. And if you cut it in the right way, you can also use that inclination for the solar panels on the roof. So we try to combine all these things: the position, the location, the reuse of materials, and also the use of new materials.
I mean, I think one of the biggest opportunities between all of us talking today is the brain power on the Dutch side, and the way that you're integrating materials and new uses for materials. Europeans in general, I think, if I can jump to that conclusion, might have a little bit more of a connectivity to reuse and to thinking twice potentially around materials and the way that they use them and the lives that they have around them. But the Dutch in particular have been known for this. So Fedor and what you're doing with Mvrdv, kudos. That's exactly what should be expanding. Kate?
Thank you, but don't underestimate also what you're doing in America, because actually the glass mural and the glass that was actually also, that can just be made in America. So I think there's also a lot for us to learn from you guys.
Well, that's exactly where I was heading next, and you're totally right. So I wanted to turn over to Kate for the same question, and you've got such great opportunities in what you're doing with Bedrock and the building structures and the rethinking of these massive footprints within a huge city that Bedrock is part of. So if you've got input on that question, we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Sure. Well, thank you again, Ivana, for inviting me to be part of this panel today. It's quite hard to follow Fedor and making the juxtaposition between the US market and Detroit in particular and the Netherlands. I believe that Bedrock's mission in the city of Detroit is so laudable. We've been here for about 11 years now, helping to motivate the renaissance of the downtown central business district. And it's been quite remarkable to see it from afar, and then moving from San Francisco to Detroit to see it up close. One of our central tenets of development is adaptive reuse. How do we use the legacy, the brilliancy of architecture and design in Detroit and elevate that in a modern way for current urban dwellers, I would say. So one of those projects I want to highlight is the Book Tower. It's a 38-story building. It's located right downtown, has this beautiful green roof to it. And not green in an environmental sense, but green in an aesthetic sense, I would say. It was built back in 1916, and we are going through the process of adaptive reuse for that building to turn it into a mixed-use facility with office space, hotel space, and residential. So that's just one example, but as you walk around downtown Detroit, you'll see that we've done this time and again with multiple historic buildings, including the Vinton, the Stott, the Buell building. So we take to heart the idea that the embodied carbon of the building is not something to disregard. It is part of the circular economy to understand what it has to give in terms of environmental sustainability, but also the social sustainability and the social fabrication that legacy gives to Detroit into the urban environment here.
So for those of us that don't know potentially or haven't been to Detroit or are not familiar with the work that Bedrock does, Bedrock has ownership, you're going to correct me on this, but I will say the majority of the buildings within downtown Detroit. I could be wrong, but I believe that's the case.
We have about 100 assets in and around the central business district of Detroit.
Yeah. And to have the, number one, the budgets, but number two, the vision, or two and one, whichever precedes the other, is key, especially as we're looking at these moments now with city building, I mean, or city rebuilding, whatever the case might be with Detroit and cities like Detroit. So I wanted to move into our next question, which is revolving around parking lots within cities, historical structures, as we just were talking about, antiquated infrastructure systems. Both Eindhoven and Detroit and so many other cities are industrial cities. They've dealt with these challenges for years. And in terms of thinking sustainably while reimagining the traditional aspect of the urban form, is there something that we can learn from one another between the Netherlands and let's say Detroit, Southeast Michigan, or vice versa? Eva, I would love to hear your thoughts on the metabolic side of the work that you do in relation to, of course, thinking sustainably for the cities and these topics.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much, Ivana. And I also have a lot of questions that I'd love to ask the other panelists, because there's a lot of things that have been prompted in my mind. But regarding the role of industrial infrastructure in cities in particular, actually, what you can see in the background of my Zoom link is a neighborhood in Amsterdam, in the northern part of Amsterdam, called Buiksloterham, which is a former industrial district just outside of the kind of center of the city. So I don't know how many of you have been to Amsterdam, but there's the kind of central ring, which I call Disney World, because that's where all the kind of cute canal houses are. And across the river, really just 5 minutes from the central station, you have this huge industrial area. And that's where a lot of the city has been expanding into. There's a free ferry that goes across there. Now, a lot of the land there was heavily polluted because of the heavy industry that was there for many decades. And we spearheaded a consortium to actually define a kind of whole circular economy living lab as part of this northern part of the city. And there's a lot of different projects that have emerged in that part of Amsterdam now that are being built in accordance with circular economy development principles, with regenerative principles. One of them you can see here, it's a floating housing community called Schoon Schip, which is 47 households in these floating buildings, so very climate resilient. It doesn't matter if it rains or floods because they're going to rise, but also with one of the most advanced smart grids, with actually processes to absorb the sewage waste and turn that into biogas. So all sorts of different innovations and optimization of lighting and positioning. So there's a number of different projects that have emerged. And I think industrial zones, naturally, as cities grow, because we know they're growing, they are getting encroached upon by just residential populations and commercial districts. And they're really great places to set up these kinds of living labs and to try doing things differently, because they often have large tracts of land, all sorts of issues, soil that needs to be remediated. So there are opportunities for testing out different forms of regeneration in urban contexts with new types of phytoremediation or bioremediation systems. So this is, I think, as we re-envision cities toward the future as really these much more integrated green spaces, these are great playgrounds for us to actually see as opportunities instead of as problems in the urban context. So that's one thing that I would say about that kind of infrastructure. I would love to also hear more about what's going on in Detroit specifically, because as I said briefly at the start, I think the only person here who has this really mixed background, where I was born and raised in New York, and I've been living in the Netherlands for the last 12 years. So I have this insight on what's going on here, and also a knowledge of how things work in the States. And we're also working very actively with lots of US cities. So I have a few specific questions. When you think there's a moment, Ivana, let me know, and I'd love to ask those.
You got it. So I think actually an extension to your great input there, Kate with Bedrock probably has some pretty interesting things to add to that, especially when we're talking about things like parking lots and historic structures, as we touched on. So Kate, if you can jump in, maybe you can add some dimension to the conversation from the Detroit side.
Sure. And about like the work that you're doing in the Netherlands is a model for a lot of the cities we see in the United States, but also around the world. So would love to also ask you questions about how that's going. Bedrock owns about 1/3 of the parking real estate in downtown Detroit, and it's been a huge part of the work that I'm doing in terms of reimagining what parking looks like for a city like Detroit that's so dependent upon the motor vehicle for lots of amazing reasons and also some detrimental reasons in terms of accessibility, mobility for people of all backgrounds. We have recently invested in a smart parking lab with the state of Michigan, with also Bosch and Ford, to be able to bring in technologies that are reimagining how we can alleviate parking within central business districts to unlock other real estate values, whether that is community space, residential space, public space. So that's been quite a joy, is to rely on the entrepreneurial spirit. About a third of urban traffic and urban emissions is accounted for by parking. So if we can think about parking and the immobility that it sort of lends itself to in a new way, then I believe that we are on a track to make cities more livable for people and not for vehicles.
So I think that that's, again, a great segue to thinking about the use of materials, but also getting those materials to the buildings and the cities that need them. So when you look at things like supply chains, for example, both of our, I'll call them geographies, so Detroit/Southeast Michigan and the Netherlands are water-based, thank goodness. But you have to bring steel and concrete and a lot of very expensive and challenging materials to the locations that need them. You've got to manage a whole infrastructure around this. There's different parts of the planet that all these materials come from. This poses a strain on the environment. So how can we also, and all of you are involved in this conversation and this topic, how can we rethink this footprint of the buildings and the materials that are used and envision potentially more viable solutions? I'm going to open it up to those that are most relevant for this topic, but I would say potentially maybe Lieutenant Governor, Eva, all of you on the call, but please chime in. I think that this is a really important point. And we saw the blockage, we saw what was going on with COVID and the challenges that are happening economically, and how can we rethink new solutions?
Yeah, this is really important in terms of how we're going to really chart a path going forward that actually is sustainable in the most, just in the truest sense of the word. And again, I'll just use the fact that I'm here in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. So, to put this in perspective in terms of the amount of iron ore that is mined and that comes through the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, it's about 96% of what's produced in the country. The iron ore and the steel that derives from that, et cetera, is mined up here and has been mined up here historically and goes through basically one choke point, the Sioux Locks, which is a whole nother infrastructure question. So this question in terms of how we manage these resources, and how we also evolve to find new, more sustainable, less extractive resources and materials to use is critical to the future of the state, the country, the world, our climate, et cetera. We've worked to make sure, one, that we're doing better in terms of, from a circular economy perspective, improving the uses and reuses and the rate of recycling here in the state of Michigan. It still is relatively low among states. We set a goal of getting our recycling rate up to about 45% over the next several years, because right now it's in the high 20s. And we also, though, have this is an opportunity, I think, for research and development to really shine. Michigan has been the beneficiary of having three amazing, world-class research universities: University of Michigan, my alma mater, but also Wayne State University in the city of Detroit, Michigan State University, and Michigan Tech University here in the UP. And the material science research that's happening there is extraordinary in terms of more organic materials that are more flexible, that can be produced more sustainably, and that can be used in a wider range and variety of scenarios and materials. We've also been innovating in terms of how we can use more reusable and renewable products to solve, infrastructure challenges, whether that is how we can use 3D printing to help address our problem of building up affordable housing at scale, and using more sustainable and organic resin to do it. How we can use hemp for paper production that can allow us to use our timber for different uses here in the state of Michigan, which has been a historical industry, but an industry that we all know is quite extractive. So there's a lot of creativity happening on this at the state level. And so while these are generally speaking relatively local and municipal choices that are made, we have a chance to show some bold leadership at the state level to really create the conditions and the space for those decision makers to be able to do more and to go farther. And so again, that's why we set our goals around a My Clean Water Plan or My Healthy Climate Plan, because we think that they can, be a model for the future.
So can I prod you a little bit?
Absolutely.
Okay, so a lot of us as citizens on the receiving end, you're the decision maker, and of course representing our goals and ideas. But us as citizens, we oftentimes hear on the governmental side great ideas, right, and ways of thinking through. How are we to be held accountable? And I'm talking collectively. What is it that we need to do truly to be held accountable to? So for example, Detroit has a sustainability action agenda. What does that mean on the business side or on organizations? How do they apply that? Is there a connectivity on the government side with public-private use of funding and a certain equity stake that needs to be put into place so that companies and all of us as citizens actually really produce the change that we're looking for?
I think there's a few ways. So certainly in terms of participation, companies need to put their money where their mouth is on this. So this is not a platitude, and I applaud. I think that Bedrock has made the choice to make sustainability a priority in some of the development decisions they're making, and the state of Michigan's been proud to be a partner in a number of those. You mentioned the smart parking lab, for example. But also us as leaders, our administration, we've prioritized. We have the political will to make this happen. We need to make sure the other lawmakers are aligned on it. And what we've been approaching is from a RFP perspective or a contracting perspective, actually putting sustainability, circular economy related goals and requirements into those standards that we're using to make the choices about who we partner with and how we partner with them, the parameters of that partnership that will have sort of, metrics and accountability related to these areas is something that's really critical. And that has not always been true, certainly in Michigan, let alone in Detroit and other places. And so we're trying to model that about how this can be truly tied to how we make choices, how we make investment decisions, how we change investment decisions when that's not working out, which has also been something that historically has been very difficult, or the government has been very reticent to do. But I think that we have an opportunity to do things differently. And I'm the kind of leader who gotten this to do things differently. And so I'm excited to do that.
Ivana, can I respond to
I want to bring you in. Yes.
Oh, great. Well, I don't know if you wanted to frame it in any way, but there was just something in particular.
Absolutely. Jump in.
All right. So one of the things that you were just talking about, Lieutenant Governor, is this kind of, these standards that the government can enforce. And something that worked really well here in the Netherlands was actually a circular tendering guideline. So the city governments still own a lot of land. And what Amsterdam has been experimenting with is actually requiring anything built on public land to comply with certain circular economy performance criteria. And so that actually creates this pull from the market to really take on other practices. But related to the question that was first asked about the embodied impact of materials, I really think that with the climate emergency bearing down on us, we have to start thinking of buildings as carbon sinks. We should really be designing all buildings as carbon sinks. And that is very much possible by moving toward bio-based materials, by looking at, there's all this material innovation that you also mentioned. There's concrete that can actually absorb carbon. There's all these self-healing models of materials as well. And that also has implications on the urban design itself, because we can't build towers that are fully renewably powered. That's very difficult to do. I mean, it's possible, but it's almost impossible. So actually moving toward lower buildings, like 3 to 4 stories, made of timber that can actually be carbon sinks, this is the kind of urban planning that could actually lead toward both a lot of affordable housing with close-knit communities, but also really addressing multiple problems at once, from loneliness in urban communities to walkability, to actually addressing the carbon impact issue. And there's a lot more that I could say about this. We, with Metabolic, we designed something called the urban mining tool, which actually models all the different materials in buildings. We tested it out in Philadelphia last year. So with this, you're also able to look at like what materials you can harvest from the built environment to effectively reuse them in new building projects. And the more we go for standardization and using tools like Medoster, which is basically like a circular economy building material passport, with the construction of every building, you can apply all of these different strategies that can really allow us to radically decarbonize, as long as the government, I think, takes a strong stance and has a vision, and also takes a lead in making the private sector comply, or at least come up with their own innovations in this space.
And this is, I think,
want to hear more about that. So I would like to hear more about those kind of parameters and how they've been used. That's really interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Happy to share it after.
Okay, so to move into another topic, because I think this brings in the actual architecture of buildings and how are they to be built, and urban density. Eva, you touched on topics right now on urban density. So Fedor, I wanted to ask you on the Mvrdv perspective, your approach to urban density, and when you think about it from a sustainability practice and perspective, how do you look at focusing in on building resilient communities with the use of architecture taking first place?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think the good thing that we learned also from working abroad, for instance, also in America, is that you have the nice word actually that is always used, is that the use of amenities is always needed in buildings. And that's something actually that in Holland is not that normal. So we also are starting to use that in our designs in Holland, to actually create spaces in especially larger buildings, to create an atmosphere that it's not only a house that's actually 60 or 70 square meters with a bedroom and you live there and that's it. But it's a community actually that you're in a building. It should be a mobile hub. It should be a yoga center should be in there. There should be green. There should be people that actually could also work there. You have seen that in the last 1.5 years that actually the houses are not made to actually also work there with your kids running around. So that's the nice thing that we're doing with a lot of buildings also now, is just to add these amenities, but also create co-working spaces on a certain level to work with each other, but also see other people in your building, that you're not anonymous, but actually living there. That's what we're trying to do. And I think we learned also from America, like you have some buildings that have on the ground floor have spaces that can be used by everybody. It's a coffee, you can drink coffee downstairs. It's open for everybody. And I think that's something we learned in San Francisco, all these spaces. And that's what we're also trying to get in the Dutch designs, but it's not that easy because you're losing square meters that you can sell. But we're getting there, I think.
Mm-hmm. And you're touching on something that I think is critical, and it's critical to folks like Simon, and then again, Lieutenant Governor too, and Kate, community. And how do you build out this notion of community? The fundamental pillar of sustainable strategies, for example, is something that I believe Kate believes in, on the community being that's a fundamental pillar of sustainable strategies. So in terms of things like social cohesion, how do you bring inclusivity into the design process in terms of projects that are integrated within our cities? Kate, Simon, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
I can start off and then I'll throw it over to you, Simon, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I work with an incredible team and who's dedicated to this exact topic of how do we, as Bedrock, who we have a large footprint in downtown Detroit, how do we make it accessible, equitable for the larger community? We have an experienced team that is working around the clock to make sure that space is activated, that it's providing opportunities for Detroiters. near and far to come in and experience a part of Detroit that might have been lost in previous decades. Over the summer, we converted Monroe Blocks area into an outdoor roller rink called the Midtown Midway. So that was really great. And then this winter, we'll be converting it into a drive-in movie theater. So on that side, we do a lot of community engagement, activation of the downtown core so that it feels lively, it feels like it's accessible to everyone. We also are bringing in local artists who are contributing in huge ways to activating space. You might have seen this walking down some of the alleys that we have converted from dilapidated spaces into mixed use public areas. So that's quite exciting. And I would say one more point is we are fortunate enough to have the Rocket Community Fund, which is a partner with us in working downtown, but they also do a ton of investment throughout the neighborhoods of Detroit in terms of neighborhood stabilization, housing stabilization, helping people rehab their homes, helping them achieve home ownership in a way to build social cohesion, not just among Detroiters, but among Detroit as a city and people that live here. So that's just a little bit about the work that we're doing. Would love to answer any questions in the chat if anyone has any interest.
Absolutely. And we're looking at Monroe Midway right out our window. It's pretty awesome.
Great.
Simon, please jump in.
So if there's 2 cents, I've got about 10 cents here where there are comments I wanted to make, but I'm going to try and roll all in together. I mean, community is really where it starts for us. And I think if there was one thing that COVID revealed to us is that, even with all the resources and institutions that our local governments have, it's hard to help every single neighborhood and every single citizen in every single neighborhood. But at the same time, there are lots of great organizations and institutions that we're looking to help and support. But that bridge in our social infrastructure between our neighborhoods and communities and those organizations just isn't strong enough. And so how do we improve that? I think you can do that programmatically, looking at a lot of different things. One of the programs that we love, which we're looking to help reboot with Data Driven Detroit, is civic user testing groups. So, working with technology, I think one of our advisors who helped inspire Detroit Urban Solutions, and I think works with Kate as well, Bruce Katz, he'd always talk about how, gentrification isn't a problem if you're doing it together, right? Rather than coming into a neighborhood and cleaning house per se. And so, how do we work more inclusively with not just programs, but technology at an earlier stage? And so that's an important part. And kind of going back to the work that Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist is doing, I think if you look at Uber and a lot of the technology companies, there's very much a ask for forgiveness, not for permission strategy. I am guilty of myself as a small nonprofit sometimes, but it's really important for policymakers to be part of the process earlier, because the technology is coming fast. We're looking at things like autonomous vehicles, which is going to require us to be creative with our parking lots, which will be new space, right? So even, for example, like, how do we get communities involved in thinking about how we reuse parking lots? If you want to reuse parking lots, think about what the demand that the community actually has for new services. And it could be things like healthcare, which I'm sure was used quite a bit during COVID. It could be things like food trucks. Brian Boyer at the University of Michigan Urban Tech Program talks a lot about this stuff. And so how do we get them part of the process of creatively thinking of what can we use this space for? And so I think just one thing we do in startups, and I teach my students in entrepreneurship, is the biggest mistake startups make is they don't go out and talk to their customers. Well, our customers are the citizens, so we really need to go out and talk to them and make sure that they're part of the process. And there are lots of ways to do that, and I think Detroit is one of the cities that's actually well positioned to do it well.
Yeah.
So Ivana, can I jump in on that? So Simon, I appreciate many elements of that. I got really excited when you talked about the civic user testing group. I actually brought the first civic user testing group to Detroit when I was working for the city. So I'm very excited to hear folks being interested in that. Ours was inspired by the work happening from the Smart Chicago Collaborative a number of years ago. And so really great to hear that coming back as a concept for participation. I think it is a really inclusive way to get people involved in decision making by giving feedback. So that's great.
We're trying to bring it to New York now too, because of Chicago and Detroit. So
that's right.
Really
that's right.
inspiring.
That's fantastic. So that's good to hear. You know, I guess the plug that I'll make is in order for systems to truly be responsive to people's needs, like people actually just have to design them. And so that means that those who are in the position of coming up with these ideas need to make sure that their processes are truly inclusive of and representative of the people, the ultimate users. So, you know, my career has not just been as a technologist or as a public official, but also as a community organizer. And what you learn in that is that, you know, the people who are living the challenges are the people who have the answers to the questions that you need. They have the solutions in front of them. And so we can't be so, you know, arrogant as to think that the best decisions are going to come, or the best solutions are going to come from any place but the community itself. And so I think we should recognize that as an opportunity here. And my plug would be for folks to actually become more involved with their government agencies, not less. Because the truth is there's only one entity that has every person in the community as its customer and constituent. That is not true for any company. That is not true for any nonprofit. That's not true for any direct service organization, but it is true for the government when it's working its best. And so we need more participation. It's up to us to design processes to welcome that and to encourage that. But I think also leaders such as yourselves who are doing so many different things, you can encourage that as well, and that'll make everything better.
So I want to also bring in our friends on the Dutch side, Eva and Fedor, because number one, I'm a believer, as we all are, in architecture and architecture making change. If you look at the Dutch transportation model, we all think on the US side, it's bike, 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 foot, foot, foot. US, Detroit in particular, is all about car and four wheels. Things are changing here fairly quickly and drastically in mobility and autonomy. But what are your thoughts when you look at, from an architecture perspective and from a strategic development perspective, Eva and Fedor, with building out community related or focused programs and projects, when you listen also to what our friends on the Detroit side are saying? How do you apply that to the work that you're doing?
You want to go first, Fedor?
Yes, that's good.
Fedor, do you want to take a stab at the question?
No, yeah, okay. Yeah, what we are doing in one of the projects is to get a mobile hub there. So actually is to not, if you have many people living in one building, it's really nice actually to also have the resources to hire a car or to get a bike. And I think that's what we're also trying to do, is to just integrate also in the building the solutions for the transport that you have to do. So of course it's good to be near a metro station and have your bike, but if you actually want to travel a little bit further, it's also nice that you don't have need your own car, but actually you can just lend one actually that's in the building itself. And that's what we're trying to do also in Rotterdam, just to integrate this in the design already. And we have one of these buildings now that also, of course, we have bikes, and we have also a lot of parking lots, but also with bikes, you need a lot of place, I have to be honest. So you see a lot of layers actually now, instead of full with cars, they're full packed with bicycles. So you also have to realize that that also has an impact in a positive way also.
Right.
Yeah. I do think that, you know, in general, one of the things that I'm struck by when I go back home to the US is just how many cars there are everywhere and how dominant cars still are in deciding how cities are, how the streets are laid out and everything. And I do think we need to be thinking toward post-private car cities. some of the research that we've done on material availability shows that even if we switch entirely to electric vehicles, we simply don't have enough of the rare earth metals that are needed to supply every single person on the planet with a private car. And ultimately, car-focused design, we know, results in less human scale environments, environments that are less walkable, less oriented toward communities that actually then produce less activity and innovation in urban contexts. So what Fedor was saying is absolutely true. Bikes also take up a lot of space. Any mobility solution will take up a lot of space, but there's really great kind of integrated design solutions to reliven and bring back the downtown areas of cities by focusing really on shared transportation solutions. And there's a lot of really interesting things coming up in the autonomous vehicle space where you can have not private autonomous vehicles, which will obviously increase the amount of time vehicles spend on the road and are empty, but rather shared autonomous vehicles that can go point to point and maybe have individual pods so you can still have some aspect of privacy. So kind of like on-demand private mini buses that are electric. There's a lot of really interesting innovations in that space that have that will have impact on urban infrastructure, and that's how we should be thinking in that direction. It should be more convenient to participate in shared urban mobility solutions than to have private mobility solutions. And if we design it that way, then that's how cities will work in the future.
I was in Europe a couple of months ago, and I came back here and also spending a little bit of time, on a longer period of time there. And when you come back to the US streets and you see massive highways, everyone's in their SUV, one individual per car, doing errands to, I don't know, pick up kids and go to work and go shop and go home. I mean, there are, I'm sure, many more creative ways of looking at solutions for that. So just
No, what you also saw is that a month ago there was the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. It was there was this how do you call it, this fabric over it from Christo, actually, to just remind the great design he made, and they actually made it. And what's so nice on the pictures is that in the surrounding they closed off all the roads, and what you saw is that it was only walkable space. And if you see how much and how many people actually could use it, that was so nice to see in the pictures also. So I think that's something also to learn, that indeed also in America, but also in Europe, the streets and the cars are taking so much space. It's actually a shame.
Yeah. So just given timing, because we can talk about this forever, these topics, but I know some of us might have to jump off. If we have time for one more quick question, I'd actually like to do a roundtable on one question. Governor Gilchrist, Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist, do you have a few more minutes? I know you might be limited with your time.
Let me see. I'll tell you in a minute. Oh, actually, I gotta jump in like 2 minutes, so I got time for one more quick one.
Okay, so why don't we start with you? The question is, and I'm going to do this really quickly, I wanted to hear from each of you, Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist going first. What's your biggest game changer that you think you are providing right now today, focused in on both either sustainability and urban design or circular economy? And I'm going to just preface this, that you have a Thriving Cities tour that you are focusing in on. That might be an interesting topic. There, you might have others, but I'd love to hear your game changer that you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So, honestly, the most ambitious thing that we're tackling in Michigan that I'm most proud of is connectivity. Every person in Detroit doesn't have internet access. Every person in Michigan doesn't have internet access. And the reason I think this ties to sustainability is because I think if our communities are better connected, not just with, transit transportation as we think about this, but in terms of relationship, in terms of internet access, that is a platform for ideas to come forth, for people to share ideas and information. And I think that will lead to some of the connections that will lead to some of the innovations that will solve our biggest challenges. I think the role of government is to create the conditions for people to be successful and for their ideas to have a chance to thrive and for them to have a chance to grow into their best selves. And so I'm working to connect everyone in Michigan online. I'm up here talking with companies that are innovating these amazing models for all sorts of internet service delivery, for affordability mechanisms, new partnerships that can raise the floor of digital literacy in communities, such that every person, every place has the ability to share their idea and perspective with the world. And I think that if we can do that, Michigan can be the first state to connect all of our people in the country. The ideas that come forth from that will be answers to these questions that we're confronting today, and will be the things that change the world. And so I think that is a game changer. I think that is the best, investment we can make in infrastructure, is that connectivity. And that's the one I'm encouraging us to really step up to meet this moment with.
Excellent. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. I know you have to run. I hope this continues in so many ways. And I know there's going to be some good connections made after this panel too.
That's right. Thank you, everyone, for the leadership you're showing.
Thank you. Have a great day. All right, so I'd like to pass that same question on. So really, what's the game changer that you believe that your organization is putting forth within the world on sustainability and sustainable urban design, or the circular economy? Kate, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Sure. I think over the last 10 years, Bedrock has done an incredible job of building density and building vibrancy back into downtown Detroit. I think right now we have an incredible opportunity to think about the network of assets that we own, not just as buildings, but as a district. And when you can leverage that sort of scale, what are opportunities there in terms of energy reduction, mobility, and connectivity, to Lieutenant Governor's point. And so I think that's really the game changer. There's not very many urban development companies that own the amount of assets in such a small area to really motivate more sustainable thinking, more sustainable initiatives. So I'm really excited to work with Bedrock's teams across the board and our tenants and our partners to ensure that that sort of mindset continues to proliferate through the policies and through the development tactics that we're pursuing within the city of Detroit, but also in the city of Cleveland. And then taking that mentality and using it to expand into the assets that we own outside of the central business district. So whether that's along the East Riverfront and unlocking more public space there. I saw a comment in the chat about how a lot of the riverfront is taken up by surface parking lots, which is a shame, should really be put towards community use. And also looking at our industrial assets over near the new Gordie Howe International Bridge that's going to be built in 2024. So the sort of density of thinking is something that is central to Bedrock's vision moving forward.
Wonderful. And I think that's a nice transition, thanks Kate, to Fedor. And as you're looking at opportunities within Detroit and the glass mural building, if that is something that you'd like to touch upon. The reason I bring that up is Eastern Market is one of the key neighborhoods within the city. And to have a building of that stature and that caliber and that vibrancy within that neighborhood would be pretty incredible. But I leave it to you. What do you believe is your game changer representing Mvrdv?
Yeah, I think what was really nice actually to go to Detroit and to see Eastern Market, but also from hear from the client to visit the site on a day that it actually is busy and not that the market is alive, and also seeing there actually what was happening there, and also knowing the history and also the history of the building we designed. I think together with firm, our client, it was really clear that he wanted to make something also for the neighborhood that actually could embrace it. And I think that's one of the important things that we wanted to do also, is to design something that actually is not strange on that location and is just also for people that are proud that live there, but also actually what was there and what is going to be there. And I think that's what also the glass mural is about. It's with the artist, as you may know, with Shiva McFly on top of it. And I think that's, I think, really fruitful to work with local artists that understand the neighborhood and to make something that buildings that are going to be embraced. And that's why they're also going to be sustainable then.
Eva, I think you're going to have something great to add to that as well, looking at what you're doing within the Netherlands, but elsewhere. What is your game changer in the work that you do with Metabolic?
Well, We do so much at Metabolic. We're not just working in urban contexts, but also across, with corporates, across supply chains, et cetera. So I would say that really the game changer that we bring is our perspective on systems change, on how to actually take complex systems like whole countries or value chains and drive them toward a sustainable state. And that's something that we've been studying from the perspective of vision development, governance, analysis of systems dynamics and stakeholders. And, I think it's this multi-scalar perspective of zooming out to look at the big picture and then zooming back in to understand what's happening really at a specific location in a particular context. And I think that actually is the game changer. It's codifying that knowledge and sharing it with other people for how to engineer systems change.
So actually looking at and applying strategy.
Yeah, in a way, but it's a whole science, the field of systems science and systems thinking, because you have to deal with so much complexity. It's like having to master chaos theory or something on some level. So, yeah.
When are we scheduling an arrival date for you to Detroit? I think we need you here.
I would love to come again. Actually, I was in Detroit just before the lockdown started here in the Netherlands. I was at the Climate Leaders Summit, and so it was the last place I was in the US, actually.
Well, we're welcoming you back. Simon, so please jump in on the game changer representation for what you do with Detroit Urban Solutions, with CivLab, and your whole mindset with what you teach.
No, absolutely. So I think, our game changer is looking at resources and organizations holistically and how they can and better work together to accomplish their goals. And we run a number of civic studios on topics, and we were just actually funded by the Economic Development Administration at the federal level to look at a number of different areas for COVID recovery and how we can kind of look at this nexus of building companies and solutions or decreasing the risk that these companies and solutions have as they scale and solve local problems within Detroit. And so we're running this project for the EDA, and outcomes are based on sustainable design and a number of different urban innovation areas such as mobility, housing, energy, wastewater, ag, but also looking at how do we kind of close the gap within the issues that is holding the commercialization of these technologies back, and how do we make that a more seamless process for those types of companies. And so, our game changer is working with others to help them accomplish their goals, especially local organizations. And we're really excited about this project. And Kate's on our steering committee. And we have a really great group of leaders that are locally helping us accomplish this.
Fantastic. Well, so what we'll do in a minute is open it up to Q&A. I hope that some of you might be able to stay, the panelists, for Q&A.
We do have to run, but I want to thank everybody. And for
okay. Okay, Simon, thank you so much for participating. And Kate, Fedor, Eva, if you can stay, you're welcome to. Of course, we understand you have tight schedules too. And I just wanted to, before we go into the Q&A, thank everybody. So number one, our 5 panelists, that's Simon, Sylvester, Chidari from Detroit Urban Solutions, Kate Gasparo with Bedrock, Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist with the state of Michigan, Eva Gledek with Metabolic, and Fedor Braun with Mvrdv. Can't thank you enough for all of the brains and smart opportunity and suggestions and ideas you've contributed, and your time, of course. This was all made possible in the Sustainable Urban Design Summit with our partners, the Consulate General of the Kingdom of the Netherlands in Chicago, Detroitisit, our media platform, Dutch Design Week, which is taking place now, and definitely check out their events at ddw.nl through the end of the week. And then also to our sponsor, Sustainable Business Network Detroit. So we have a few more minutes, about 15 for those that are on the Zoom call on the participant side. We welcome and open it up to questions. If you have questions, you can raise your hand. You can put in questions in the chat. We have one, I think, here for Eva from Alyssa. And Eva, Alyssa is asking, you had discussed in high-rise architecture is not impossible, but difficult. In a reality in terms of being fully sustainable. As a student who designed a project that aims to be exactly that for the year 2100, so we're looking forward, I'd like to know if you think it would be more possible for this type of architecture to be constructed in the future. So we're looking forward focused on architecture that would be maybe impossibly facilitated today, might have opportunity for the future. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so there are no cut and dry answers with these types of questions. So it's very difficult to make a high-rise building carbon neutral currently, because they're, first of all, the materials that they're made of are very carbon intensive, a lot of steel, a lot of concrete, but also the surface area that they have on their roofs compared to the amount of activity that they can house in them is difficult to actually kit out with very efficient energy generation. And you necessitate elevators, for example, in these large buildings. You have to have like a very intensive ventilation systems. All of those draw a lot of power. That doesn't mean that you can't have sustainable towers as long as they're built in the correct ratio relative to how much renewable energy we can generate in the hinterlands or in the outskirts of cities. Like, you need a good balance. You can have towers that are energy drawing buildings, as long as you can build enough solar or wind generation elsewhere. Now, of course, as we move into the future, there's all sorts of new technologies that are coming out. So I'm curious what Alyssa has been working on, but they're integrating energy generating films into windows and having those become more efficient. There's also, of course, even the possibility that we're going to have nuclear fusion, and that will have like an energy infinite future. So much depends on the direction of technological progress, because sustainability, in terms of it's a moving target. It all depends on context as well.
Right. Hi everybody.
Hi, Alyssa.
Hi. So I work with Thomas Begelhalter at FIU. He runs and helps with Crunch Miami, and we do incorporate a lot of these systems. My project focused a lot on Dutch sustainability. Strategies that they've been dealing with for hundreds of years, since they are under sea level already. And in Miami, we have the issue of sea level rising. So we do implement, I actually have it as my virtual background, since I do work with him currently again. I have the same professor. And we do implement a lot of these strategies. So the project was to aim for carbon neutrality. So
these are great topics, Alyssa. I mean, you brought up something pretty incredible, and I think that Eva certainly gave some insight on that. So we thank you for sharing your questions. Thanks for joining. We've got another one from Jesse for Fedor. And Jesse's asking, what materials and techniques will make up future facades, and what consequences will these materials have on architecture? You brought up something with aubergines, a topic earlier. Maybe there's some more opportunity that you have, or other materials to discuss?
Yeah, I think, we would like to, would love to actually build with wood on the outside, but that's also already tricky with all the weather conditions that you have in a lot of countries. I think that's a big challenge, because you see that commercial towers, commercial buildings need to be built also in some kind of cheap way, or they have to be light. And most of the time you go into aluminium or concrete facades, and that's something we have to really get out of, because I think these are the ones that are really polluting also. So we're looking for bricks that are reusable, or actually made from garbage. So I think that's the thing we're really looking for, but it's still quite hard to get really good bio-based facade materials, I have to be honest. And what I said, we were working with eggplants. In the end, it was not that strong. So it's still a fight of getting good materials that are bio-based.
Yeah, no doubt. But and when you do this, is there a research team that's on your team that looks into these materials?
Yeah, we have a research team already for I think from the start of the office. So also working together with universities, seeing what the materials can do, how all materials can work together, glass, but also with green on top of concrete. How can that work? So yeah, we're also doing a lot of investigations with universities on that.
Phenomenal. We have a question here from Wilpert Garrick. It's actually a statement, but I think it could be pertinent to Kate and what's going on in the waterfront or properties around the waterfront. So Detroit has a huge opportunity on the water. Why not look at it in different ways? You mentioned something earlier on the parking lot side, but what about this need to reclaim some of the land for public urban use? And how do we potentially go about that?
So I tried to address a little bit of this earlier. I think I was remiss in not saying more about the Riverfront Conservancy and really all of the work they've done to connect the riverfront from the east side of downtown through the west. And now they're working on the last component of that right next to where the bridge will take you over to Belle Isle. So they've done an amazing job of unlocking lots of value for the community, value for the city and for visitors in terms of activating that downtown space and making sure there's programming to support that. We recently purchased a property, the old Stroh's manufacturing buildings next to Atwater Street and Atwater Brewery. That is an amazing opportunity for us to contribute to the work that the Riverfront Conservancy is doing, and also to begin to think at this sort of density level about how we can motivate more community engagement, how we can motivate more public uses around our site to sort of speak to how we can start playing a role, maybe not near the Rensen, but on the other side of the riverfront, and hopefully that there will be more momentum to sort of change the narrative there.
And I think you bring up a really good point, Kate, on partnership opportunities. So like you mentioned, the Riverfront Conservancy, also the Wilson Foundation that put in a investment to facilitate the work. So it is a lot of public-private relationships and partnerships that need to be put into place. Obviously, money matters in order to have things happen. So all good points. We have Miles Phillips that's asking, which I think is a great question, which countries or governments or cities are at the forefront of innovation and future advancements in sustainable design? Eva, that might be a great question for you to consider and answer towards.
Which governments and cities are at the forefront of sustainable design? That is a tricky thing to say, to discuss. I mean, there's so many really interesting examples. I would say that, we've done quite some work in Singapore, and I'm always really impressed by what Singapore is doing in terms of its urban planning and really doing a lot of analysis and how they've designed their entire water system to create this huge catchment area in the city. But there's also, obviously I see a lot of pioneering work going on in the Netherlands, in Denmark, in this whole part of Europe in general, like Northwestern Europe. And, increasingly there's a lot of governments in North America and the United States that are really taking on the charge of moving toward a circular economy and taking a lot of these types of challenges seriously. Though I find that in the US, one of the things that I've noticed is that in the US, there's like less planning and talk and more action. So once there's a decision to do something, things really go forward. Whereas here, there's a lot of planning, reports, analyses, and it takes a really long time to get the plan just right. And then there's action, but it's maybe less firepowered and a bit slower, but more measured. So I have high hopes that actually as soon as governments in the US really decide that this is the direction that they're going in, that there's going to be a huge force of private sector money and influence that will really just supercharge the speed with which American cities in particular take on these challenges.
And that's why I also think, opportunities like what we're having today, where there is an international discourse focused in on particular cities that are being refurbished and re-envisioned in new ways. These things need to keep happening. So great point, Eva. Pace, and I think, Kate, that's something that's of relevance for you and with Bedrock. And do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because that was something that Robert brought up as a question.
I feel like Robert might be more of an expert on this than I am. I am very fortunate at Bedrock to work with Nadia Sisse, who used to work in the city and county of San Francisco, and she's led some of the largest PACE financing deals in the country. And so she has now come out to Detroit, and so we work alongside each other and looking at opportunities within our own portfolio, whether that's in new builds like the Hudson Tower or in our capital expense projects, and how we can ensure that any roof replacement we look at has an opportunity to become a green roof, a blue roof, to assist with energy efficiency, but also with stormwater mitigation. And PACE allows us to dream big. It allows us to think innovatively about that financing aspect, which you said, Ivana, money speaks. And so having innovative tools from the government to assist with that has been a huge help.
Excellent. And I think, Robert, did you want to chime in on the point? You're welcome to.
It's just very exciting to hear that Bedrock is looking at PACE financing for development and redevelopment of some of their buildings. Obviously, Bedrock is well funded, but even they understand that bringing in non-recourse money anywhere between 4 and 5% for a roof, HVAC, insulation, elevator, is much smarter use of their money than having it, invested in those types of infrastructure projects that'll not only save money, but free up Bedrock to do more of its great innovations around our city and elsewhere. So I applaud those efforts. I've been trying to lead the PACE march here in Michigan for the last 10 years. And if there's ever any question that anybody has, it'd be great to reach out with them. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thanks, Robert. I'm putting my email in the chat so we can connect.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. Miles, you're back on. Might be a sensitive question, but are there certain powers in a corporate or government level that restrict progress, growth, and long-term solutions? I mean, I think that we touched upon that with Lieutenant Governor when he was on the panel before he left. I leave that open to others, but it is I don't think it's necessarily a sensitive question. I think it's a very relevant question. I don't know if anybody that's on the panel now would have the answer to that, but I think all of our takeaways on that point is government needs to be part of the conversation, if not leading some of it, but ultimately government is run by us. Right, so they listen to us. That's the goal in order to have change made. And if anyone is going to do it, not only because he's a friend, but he's such an innovative thinker, Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist will be on our side for Michigan. Is our feeling. So let's have Eva chime in on that too. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have a couple of observations, and I also feel like Kate probably has a lot to add there too. But we have been working with several cities in the U.S. on developing circular economy transition plans, and the laws from state to state are very different, but and from city to city. But we've definitely run into certain peculiarities that have made it very difficult in some cases to implement these plans. So, for example, in North Carolina, it's very difficult for for homeowners to install solar panels to get their own buildings decarbonized, because you're forced to buy energy from Duke Energy. There's like these centralized single provider contracts, and those are of course arranged by state governments. And the details of this are more complex, but you have these kinds of restrictions. Or some municipalities have really, really long-term contracts for waste handling. So, the New York City has 20-year contracts with their waste handling companies, which means that if you want to move toward a different model, like for example, moving toward reuse instead of recycling, I was part of a big working group for the World Economic Forum on moving beyond disposables in cities and really setting up washing facilities and being able to centralize this. That's really impossible with these 20-year contracts that city governments would then have to break. So sometimes it's not even the government's fault. It's just these infrastructures that are in place, these rules that are there that have to be looked at more critically. And how to change that from the inside is pretty challenging. So those are just two examples, but these kinds of things are plentiful.
And complex. And actually, you brought up an excellent component of the conversation that I forgot to hit on. But World Economic Forum, I don't know if you are aware of this, Eva, and maybe Fedor, for those of us in Detroit, we know. It was just announced in August that the innovation, one of the partnership opportunities within Detroit is a home base for the Innovation Center of the World Economic Forum. So that's, it's going to be a long-term relationship with a lot of the stakeholders within the city. So that's a conversation to continue having, and definitely with you in the mix. So great. So we're wrapping up. It's about a minute left to go. Kate, did you maybe have a comment you wanted to bring in on that topic, or?
No, I think Eva did a wonderful job. It's such a complex ecosystem of stakeholders, and I think the government at the end of the day is the only stakeholder that's required to adhere to what the people want. So working as a private company, there are different incentives, working for nonprofits, working for utilities. Everybody has different incentives, but at the end of the day, the government works for the people. And so they must be a partner, and they must be always listening to the community. And so as long as that's happening, we know that there will be good incentives put in place for the rest of us. So
wonderful.
It's so complex.
Yeah, it's complex. And Fedor, I wanted to bring you in. You might have a different perspective on the Netherlands side, or with working within projects in the States. Do you have thoughts on that conversation?
Yeah, I know that Eva also touched it. I think we have sometimes tenders in Amsterdam that are almost driven by biodiversity and green spaces instead of the design of the building. So that's going the other way, and that's interesting also to see that if you do tenders that are done by the government, you can always push for more sustainability in these kind of stuff. So I think that could be interesting if you're doing this also, the tenders in the US or in Detroit. I think that would be interesting to push that a little bit more. But I always see the government as a partner, not as somebody who's working against you.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. So we're going to wrap this up. I can't thank all of you, the three of you now, and all five panelists one more time: Simon Sylvester Chidari, Kate Gasparo, Garland Gilchrist, Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist, Eva Gledek, Fedor Braun. Can't thank you enough for making this happen. Our partners within the Consulate General of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, Detroitisit, Dutch Design Week. We hope that this is going to continue for the following years, and you'll certainly be hearing from us in the future. Thank you, attendees. The questions were incredible. Keep them coming. You can reach out to us at hi@detroitisit.com, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that you have after this too. And you'll be receiving newsletters from us as a follow-up. So once more, thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Ivana. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Bye.